Today's message is Exodus chapter 11. This is it's a short chapter, but it's often overlooked. But I know there's something very important in this chapter. Yes, the overall theme of the chapter is God's warning about Egypt's firstborn, and of course that leads into the 10th and final plague of Exodus chapter 12, which is a familiar chapter, the chapter of the Passover and the blood on the doorposts. But there was something else I wanted to pick out from the first couple of verses. So let's read Exodus 11, verses 1 to 3. And the Lord said to Moses, I will bring one more plague on Pharaoh and on Egypt. Afterward he will let you go from here. When he lets you go, he will surely drive you out from here altogether. And just as a side note, this conversation of chapter 11, we mentioned before in the previous video, must have happened before verse 28, when Moses finally says, get away from me. In the day you'll see my face, you die. I take it that the conversation of chapter 11 occurred some point in chronology before verses 28 and 29. Verse 2, speak now in the hearing of the people, and let every man ask from his neighbor, and from every woman, and from her neighbor, articles of silver and articles of gold. And the Lord gave the people favor in the sight of the Egyptians. Moreover, the man Moses was very great in the land of Egypt, in the sight of Pharaoh's servants, and in the sight of the people. And what I wanted to focus on is verses 2, verse 2, articles of silver and gold. Some time ago when I was looking at, or reading through actually the book of Exodus, I noticed later on in the book of Exodus, the people of Israel and Moses and those that were led by God and spirit controlled came to build the tabernacle. But bearing in mind that the children of Israel were traveling across the desert, it wasn't like here, it wasn't green. The thing that really struck me when the tabernacle is construction is mainly of gold and silver and precious materials. But the thing that struck me was, where did they get those materials from? And so in this chapter, in Exodus chapter 11, we get the final announcement of the final plague that will come upon Egypt, the death of the firstborn. And of course this chapter sets the stage for the departure of the Israelites and the fulfillment of God's promise to Abraham that his descendants would inherit the land of Canaan. But we read in verses 2 and 3, articles of silver and articles of gold. In this passage, God commands the Israelites to ask the Egyptians for silver, gold, and other valuables. God ensures that the Israelites will find favor with the Egyptians, and its wealth will transfer without resistance. And because when the Israelites eventually are free from Egypt, they take with them the wealth they acquired from the Egyptians. This wealth, of course, plays a critical role in the construction of the tabernacle, which is God's dwelling place among his people. God gives detailed instructions for the tabernacle and its furnishings, Exodus chapter 25 to 31, and the materials required for its construction are the same items that the Israelites borrowed in commerce from the Egyptians. Exodus chapter 12, verse 35, which is the next chapter after the Passover, they asked from the Egyptians articles of silver, gold, and clothing, and the Lord gave them favor in the sight of the Egyptians, so they granted what they requested, and they plundered the Egyptians. This is a fulfillment of Exodus chapter 11. The Israelites are given the valuables by the Egyptians, compelled by God's favor, and gave them the items that were later going to be used in the construction of the tabernacle. So when we come to the first chapter in Exodus, connected specifically with the tabernacle, Exodus chapter 25, we read these words. Moses was given specific instructions on how they're to build it. The key materials are gold, silver, bronze, fine linen, goat hair, ram skins dyed red, porpoise skins or badger skins, acacia wood, olive oil for lampstands, spices for anointing oil, and incense. These materials are very similar, if not the same, as what the Israelites had plundered from the Egyptians. The gold and silver in particular are vital for the ark, the altar, and other items in the tabernacle. Later on, Exodus chapter 35, when we get to this chapter, the Israelites are starting to construct the tabernacle, and the people are to bring the offerings they collected. This is what we read. And Moses spoke to all the congregation of the children of Israel, saying, "This is the thing which the Lord commanded, saying, Take from among you an offering to the Lord. Whoever is of a willing heart, let him bring it as an offering to the Lord, gold, silver, bronze, blue, purple, scarlet thread, fine linen, goat's hair, and ram skins dyed red, badger skins, acacia wood, oil for the light, and spices for the anointing oil for the sweet incense, onyx stones, and stones to be sent in the ephod and the breastplate." Here the Israelites are required to bring exactly the same materials they had obtained from the Egyptians, thus linking the Exodus chapter 11 and 12 with the tabernacle's construction. This shows us God's sovereignty. The wealth transfer from Egypt to Israel demonstrates God's control over the hearts of the Egyptians. Even though they had oppressed the Israelites, God caused them to freely give their possessions, illustrating that God can use the wealth and resources of the world to accomplish his divine purposes. Secondly, the gold, silver, and other precious metals taken from Egypt are symbolic of God's provision for his people as they transition from slavery to freedom. The tabernacle, built with these same materials, becomes a symbol of God's presence with his redeemed people. Thirdly, the materials for the tabernacle were not provided out of thin air, but from the generosity of the Egyptians, who are moved by God's favor. This illustrates God's faithfulness in providing everything for the people need, and also for the work that he calls them to do. And so we can sum up by saying the plundering of Egypt in Exodus chapter 11 is directly connected to the construction of the tabernacle later on in the book of Exodus, which becomes the center of Israel's worship. But the other thing that really struck me was that those materials were only gained through the pain of slavery and suffering and hardship and difficulty. And the point that really struck me was it's often like that in our lives as Christians. The hardships, the difficulties, the obstacles, the frustrations, and the times we have to get on our knees before God and ask God for strength and help. It's in those times that God builds the very character of Christ into our lives. So just as the Israelites got the materials they needed to effectively serve God in the hardship and suffering of slavery, so as Christians, it's in the difficult places that God forms our character and makes us more like Christ. It's a very challenging thought, but I just thought I would see the connection between Exodus chapter 11. Thank you for listening.